Chapter 1: The House I Bought with Love. I bought a house so my parents would never have to worry again. I paid every bill, signed every paper, and trusted my family completely. Then one day, I showed up unannounced, and my key no longer worked. The locks had been changed. My brother told me I didn't live there anymore. My mother said families shouldn't count ownership, and a few weeks later, I discovered they were quietly trying to transfer the house without my name. I didn't scream, I didn't confront them. I stayed silent, gathered proof, and let the law speak. My name is Evelyn, and this is how my own family taught me the true cost of love without boundaries. I have always been the dependable one in my family, the daughter who built her life quietly and kept it standing no matter what shifted around her. I worked in supply chain operations for most of my adult life, moving from coordinator to senior manager over the course of 15 steady years. It was not glamorous work, but it was predictable, structured, and honest. I knew how to plan, how to anticipate problems, how to keep systems from breaking when pressure hit. Stability was not just my job, it was my identity. My parents admired that about me, or at least they said they did. My mother, Eleanor, had spent decades teaching elementary school, mastering the art of sounding calm even when she was directing the outcome. She spoke gently, chose her words carefully, and rarely raised her voice. My father, Harold, was quieter, a retired electrical technician who believed in keeping the peace at all costs. When tension crept into a room, he softened his shoulders and looked away, trusting that things would resolve themselves if no one pushed too hard. Growing up, I learned early that if I wanted clarity, I would have to create it myself. When they began talking about retirement, the tone of our conversations changed. It was subtle at first. Mentions of rising rent, comments about friends who had been forced to move after lease renewals jumped beyond what they could afford. My mother talked about how exhausting it felt to live somewhere that never truly felt permanent. My father worried quietly about what a fixed income would mean if expenses kept climbing. They did not ask me for help outright, but they did not have to. The concern hung in the air between us, unspoken but persistent. At the time, I was doing well financially. I lived modestly, traveled often for work, and had built a savings cushion without even realizing how large it had become. I told myself I was lucky. I told myself I should use that luck responsibly. The idea of buying a house for my parents did not arrive as a dramatic gesture. It came as a practical solution, presented calmly over dinner one night. I explained the numbers, I explained the benefits, I said it would give them security and eliminate the stress they had been carrying. They were overwhelmed with gratitude. My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand. My father nodded, eyes glassy, and said he would take care of the place as if it were his own. I believed him. I believed both of them. We found a house in a quiet neighborhood outside the city center, close enough to conveniences but far enough to feel settled. 2 stories, a small yard, nothing extravagant. The purchase closed in the summer of 2016. The price was just over $300,000. I paid a quarter of it up front and signed a 30-year mortgage in my own name. Every document listed me as the sole owner. I read each page carefully, the way I always did, and felt confident that everything was clear. The day my parents moved in, I watched them walk through the empty rooms with a mixture of relief and pride. My mother talked about where she would put her books. My father measured walls in his head, already planning small repairs. They hugged me at the door and thanked me again. My mother said I had given them peace. I carried that sentence with me for a long time. My brother Daniel was there too, energetic as always, talking about property values and future potential. He worked as an independent real estate agent and never missed an opportunity to frame things in terms of strategy. He congratulated me on the timing of the purchase and said the neighborhood was a smart choice. At one point, he suggested that it might help if he kept copies of the house paperwork, just in case anything came up with the bank or the city. He said it casually, like an afterthought, and I agreed without much hesitation. He dealt with these things every day. It seemed harmless. Later, while we were cleaning up, my mother leaned toward me and lowered her voice. She said it might be best not to mention to the neighbors that the house was technically in my name. People judged situations they did not understand, she said. It was better to keep things simple. She smiled as if she were offering advice for my own good. I felt a brief flicker of discomfort, but it passed quickly. I told myself she was right. Not everything needed to be explained. Within weeks, the house fully became theirs. Their furniture filled the rooms, their routines shaped the space. I paid the mortgage automatically every month, the withdrawal leaving my account as quietly as it arrived. I didn't think twice about it. Responsibility felt natural to me. We had a small dinner together a few weeks after the move, sitting around the kitchen table my parents had carried over from their apartment. The mood was relaxed. Daniel joked about how lucky our parents were to have landed in such a stable situation. He said the house was really a family home now, something that belonged to all of us in spirit. He laughed when he said it, lifting his glass. My mother smiled. My father stayed quiet. I laughed too, though a second later than everyone else. The words settled strangely in my chest, but I pushed the feeling aside. Family spoke loosely. Intentions mattered more than phrasing. That's what I told myself. When I left that night, I paused in the driveway before getting into my car. The porch light cast a warm glow over the front of the house. My parents were inside, safe and settled. I felt a deep sense of satisfaction, the kind that comes from believing you have done the right thing without being asked. Any lingering unease felt small compared to that. Driving home, I thought about how good it felt to be needed in a healthy way, to give support without resentment, to believe that trust was a shared understanding rather than a fragile agreement. I did not yet see how easily care could be misdefined as control, or how quickly generosity could be rewritten as obligation. All I knew was that the house stood solid behind me, and at that moment, that felt like proof enough that I had built something lasting. Chapter 2. When Support Turned into Entitlement. The year everything began to feel unstable was 2021, although at the time I did not recognize it as the beginning of anything. My company announced a major internal restructuring in late winter. I worked in regional logistics operations, overseeing distribution schedules and vendor coordination across several states. I kept my position, but the annual bonus structure I had depended on was quietly removed. No meeting, no discussion, just a line in an email explaining that leadership had made a necessary adjustment. I told myself it was fine. My base salary still covered my expenses. I had savings. I was not in danger. Still, something inside me shifted. I had built my life on consistency, and suddenly the ground felt less solid. I did not reach out to my parents for help. I did not even mention money. What I wanted was understanding, a reminder that I did not have to be strong all the time. When I called my mother Eleanor, she answered less often. When she did, she sounded distracted, as if her attention was already elsewhere. She told me I had always been capable, that I would figure it out like I always did. My father, Harold, stayed in the background, offering short comments about perseverance and patience. The calls ended quickly. There was no space to sit with what I was feeling. I noticed the change, but said nothing. I did not want to sound needy. I had spent my entire life proving that I was reliable, that I did not ask for more than I could handle. Around that time, my brother Daniel began spending more time at the house. He framed it as helping out. He was a realtor used to dealing with paperwork, phone calls, appointments. My parents spoke about him with appreciation, mentioning how helpful he had been, how much stress he was taking off their shoulders. They said he was making sure everything ran smoothly. At first, I felt relieved. I told myself this was what support looked like, siblings stepping in when they could. I trusted Daniel to stay in his lane. Then, small details started to feel off. In the spring of 2023, I missed a call from my bank while I was in a meeting. When I returned it later, the representative asked me to confirm my mailing address. I gave it without hesitation. There was a pause on the line. She told me their system showed a different address listed as primary, my parents' house. I corrected her immediately, assuming it was a clerical error. A few weeks later, an email from the Homeowners Association landed in my inbox, forwarded automatically. I noticed it had originally been sent to my parents' address. When I asked Daniel about it during a family dinner, he waved it off. He said he had called them on my parents' behalf to simplify things. He said official letters made them anxious, and he was just trying to help. I told him I wanted to be informed if anything changed. He smiled, nodded, and changed the subject. My mother later pulled me aside and told me I was reading too much into it. She said Daniel was being thoughtful, that families did not need to micromanage each other. Her voice was calm, reassuring, and dismissive all at once. The moment things became undeniable happened on a Saturday afternoon. I stopped by the house without calling ahead. I had left a box of old work documents in the guest room closet months earlier and needed them for an internal review. When I tried my key, it did not turn. I stood there for a second, confused, then tried again. The lock was new. I rang the doorbell. My father opened the door slowly, surprise flashing across his face before he masked it. He told me I should have called first. I looked past him and saw Daniel at the kitchen table with folders spread out in front of him. The sight made my chest tighten. I asked why the lock had been changed. My mother appeared behind my father, her arms loosely folded. She said there had been some safety concerns in the neighborhood. Daniel had suggested the upgrade. It was nothing personal. I asked why no one had told me. Daniel said, gently, that I did not live there. He said they were just trying to make things easier for Mom and Dad. I said I needed to grab my files. He hesitated, then told me it would be better if I gave them notice next time. Too many unexpected visits made my parents uncomfortable, he said. They were trying to keep things organized. I waited for my parents to say something different. My father stared at the floor. My mother sighed. She told me I was overreacting. She said this was still family and that I did not need to turn everything into a legal issue. I asked why decisions about my property were being made without me. Daniel leaned back in his chair and said I always took things too personally. He said they were doing what was best for our parents. My mother nodded and added that families did not count receipts. She said I had helped because I wanted to, and bringing up ownership now felt unnecessary. That word stayed with me as I walked back to my car. Unnecessary. I realized my role had shifted without my consent. I was no longer the decision maker. I was the background support, something already used. As I drove away, Mrs. Allen from next door waved. She smiled warmly and commented on how nice it was that I visited my parents. She said they were lucky to own such a lovely home. When I corrected her and told her I had purchased it, she was embarrassed. She said my mother had mentioned downsizing years ago and settling into something that finally belonged to them. That night, I replayed every interaction from the past 2 years, the redirected mail, the missed calls, the way Daniel spoke about my involvement as if it were already behind us. I realized they had been rewriting the story while I was still living inside it. A week later, my mother mentioned during a tense phone call that they had spoken to a legal advisor, just to understand their options, she said. Daniel had suggested it. There was nothing to worry about. I ended the call early, my voice steady as my hands shook. For the first time, I understood that my place in the family had changed. It was no longer built on trust. It was built on convenience. I drove past the house that evening, the lights glowing warmly through the windows. It looked the same as it always had, but it no longer felt like something I had given. It felt like something that had been taken. Chapter 3. Silence is not surrender. It was clarity that finally settled in after the shock wore off. Not comfort, not relief, just a sharp understanding that whatever came next could not be handled the way I had handled everything before. I stopped calling. I stopped explaining. I stopped trying to sound reasonable to people who had already decided who I was supposed to be. Instead, I chose silence, not as surrender, but as space. The first night, I did not sleep. I sat at my dining table long after midnight, pulling documents from drawers and old folders I had not opened in years. Mortgage statements, closing paperwork, bank transfers, insurance notices. I laid everything out in neat rows, the way I always did at work when a system was failing and I needed to see the whole picture. Dates lined up, payments traced back to my account. Every signature was mine. Every responsibility had been mine from the beginning. I felt something close to grief as I looked at the evidence, not because I doubted what I would find, but because I realized how long I had allowed confusion to replace clarity. I had trusted tone and intention more than structure. I had believed that love would keep things fair without boundaries. Seeing the facts so plainly felt like waking up in a room I thought I knew and realizing the furniture had been moved while I slept. I did not tell my parents what I was doing. I did not confront my brother. Silence gave me time to think without being interrupted, corrected, or reframed. A few days later, I met my friend Rachel Kim at a quiet coffee shop near her office. Rachel worked in human resources and had spent years navigating power dynamics disguised as kindness. She studied my face before I even spoke. "You look exhausted," she said. I told her everything, slowly at first, then all at once. The changed lock, the redirected mail, the way my brother spoke as if decisions had already been made, the way my mother dismissed my concerns with calm phrases that made me feel unreasonable for asking questions. Rachel listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned forward slightly and met my eyes. "You are not crazy." The words landed heavier than I expected. My throat tightened. "They are gaslighting you," she continued, "and they are doing it in a way that feels polite, which makes it harder to recognize." I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding. "You have been conditioned to keep the peace," she said. "That does not mean you are wrong. It means they know which buttons to press." I asked her what she would do. "I would talk to a lawyer," she said. "Not to threaten anyone, just to understand your position before someone else defines it for you." The following week, I sat in a small office across from Linda Brooks, a family law attorney recommended by a colleague. Linda was calm, composed, and efficient. She did not rush me. She asked me to explain everything from the beginning, and she listened without judgment. She reviewed the documents carefully, marking notes in the margins, asking questions about timing and communication. After a while, she set the papers down and looked at me directly. "Legally, the house is yours." I blinked. "There is no transfer of title," she said. "No recorded agreement, no ownership interest assigned to your parents. They are occupants, that is all." Something loosened in my chest. I had been bracing for complexity, for legal gray areas that would trap me in indecision. "So they cannot make decisions without me," I said. "No," Linda replied, "they cannot." She explained the difference between permission and ownership, between informal family arrangements and legal reality. I felt embarrassed listening to her, not because I had done anything wrong, but because I had allowed responsibility to exist without authority for so long. At her suggestion, I met with Michael Hayes, a mortgage consultant who specialized in long-term payment histories. He confirmed what the paperwork already showed. "Every payment came from you," he said, tapping the file. "No refinancing, no shared liability, clean record." The word control echoed in my mind on the drive home. Control had always sounded selfish to me. Now it sounded necessary. When I returned to Linda's office a second time, she had something waiting. She slid a folder across the desk. "There is something else you need to see," she said. Inside was a draft document, a quitclaim deed that had never been filed. My name appeared at the bottom, signed in a way that looked close enough to fool someone who was not looking carefully, and wrong enough to make my stomach drop. "This signature does not match yours," Linda said. I stared at the page, my hands cold. "There is more," she added. She showed me an email chain sent by my brother Daniel to a third party months earlier. The subject referenced future planning. In the body, he wrote about transferring title when timing was right, about avoiding conflict, about keeping everything within the family. I felt a strange calm as I read it. Not shock, confirmation. "Intent matters," Linda said, "and this shows intent." On the drive home, my thoughts spiraled. I imagined the conversations that would follow, the accusations, the disappointment. In the Midwest, family loyalty was not just a value, it was an expectation. Boundaries were often mistaken for betrayal. That night, I lay awake thinking about how easily I would be labeled ungrateful, how quickly years of support could be reduced to a single narrative that painted me as cold and calculating. But beneath the fear, something else was taking shape: resolute. When I returned to Linda's office a few days later, we discussed next steps: certified mail, documentation, process. I asked whether I should warn my parents, give them time to adjust. She shook her head gently. You do not owe them a preview. You owe yourself protection. When she handed me the authorization papers, my hand trembled slightly as I signed, not from doubt, but from the weight of the choice. I was stepping out of the role I had played my entire life. As I walked out of the building, the afternoon light felt sharper, clearer. I sat in my car for a moment, breathing slowly, letting the fear pass through me instead of stopping me. For the first time since everything had begun to unravel, I was no longer reacting. I was choosing what came next. Chapter 4. When Paper Speaks Louder Than Family. It lasted only a short while before the calm gave way to motion. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Linda's office letting me know the paperwork had been finalized. The legal demand and eviction notice were already sealed and scheduled to go out by certified mail. I stared at the screen longer than necessary, then set the phone face down on the table. I had done what I needed to do. The rest was no longer mine to manage. 3 days later, the first envelope arrived at the house. I did not see it myself, but I heard about it almost immediately. My mother Eleanor called before noon. I let it ring until it stopped. She called again 5 minutes later, then again. When I finally answered, her voice came through strained and breathless. Why would you do this to us? I did not respond right away. We got the letter, she continued. People saw it. The neighbors saw it. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? I'd tried to talk before, I said. You told me I was overreacting. She inhaled sharply. We are your parents, she said. We did not think you would actually go this far. I went as far as I had to, I replied. Her tone shifted the way it always did when blame stopped working. We're scared, she said. We're old. This house is all we have. I closed my eyes for a moment. It is my house, I said quietly. I asked to be included. I asked for honesty. There was a long pause on the line. We did not mean for it to end like this, she said. I did not either, I answered. I ended the call before it could spiral further. An hour later, my brother Daniel called. You are making a mess of everything, he said, skipping any greeting. The whole street knows now. I did not choose that, I said. Your actions did. You're embarrassing Mom and Dad, he said. This is not how family handles problems. You stopped treating me like family a long time ago, I replied. He lowered his voice. You still have time to stop this, he said. Think about what people will say. Think about how this makes us look. I'm thinking about reality, not appearances. He hung up without responding. 2 days after that, the process server arrived. A man in a neutral jacket carrying a clipboard and an envelope. Mrs. Allen was outside tending her garden. Another neighbor lingered near the mailbox. The interaction lasted less than a minute. The impact lingered far longer. Later that afternoon, I drove past the house. I did not stop. I saw my mother sitting heavily on the front steps. I saw my father Harold standing beside her, his shoulders slumped. I saw Daniel pacing near the driveway, phone pressed to his ear. For the first time, the scene felt final. That evening, my father called. I should have spoken up, he said quietly. I let things get out of hand. I listened. I thought avoiding conflict would keep everyone safe. I was wrong. I needed you to say something, I said. I know, and I'm sorry. It was not a dramatic apology. It did not come with excuses. It did not ask for forgiveness. It did not change anything, but it mattered. The final meeting took place at Linda's office the following week. The room was small and neutral, designed for facts rather than feelings. My parents sat side by side, stiff and silent. Daniel sat across from me, his jaw tight. Linda laid the documents out carefully. She walked through the title, the payment records, the draft transfer that had never been filed, the email discussing timing. No one interrupted. "This is the legal position," Linda said calmly. "There is no ambiguity." My parents stared at the table. My father folded his hands. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "So this is it. You're choosing paper over blood." I met his eyes. "I'm choosing clarity," I said. "You made sure there was no other option." The room fell silent. As we stood to leave, Linda touched my arm. "There's one more thing you should know," she said quietly. "Your brother's broker has advised him to step away from any transaction involving this property due to the dispute." I nodded. One sentence was enough. 2 days later, I sat alone at my kitchen table with the sale paperwork spread in front of me. I read every page carefully. I signed slowly. When I finished, I did not feel victorious. I felt settled. That night, I stayed home. The quiet felt heavy, but it was honest. Nothing had been won. Something had simply been brought to an end. Chapter 5. What I kept was myself. I did not fall apart because I lost the house or because my family moved on without me. I fell apart because I stopped holding it together. The moment the decision was final, the moment there was nothing left to negotiate or defend, everything I had been bracing against finally let go. The house sold in early 2024, quietly and efficiently. The final offer came in at just over $410,000. No bidding war, no drama, no emotional speeches. I signed the closing documents alone at my kitchen table, the same place where I had once sat, surrounded by paperwork, trying to make sense of how things had gone so wrong. This time, there was no confusion. When the funds landed in my account, I stared at the number for a long time. It did not feel like a victory. It felt like a chapter closing exactly where it was supposed to. My parents moved out within a few weeks. I did not witness it. I heard about it from a neighbor who texted me to say a moving truck had come early that morning. By the time I drove past the house that evening, the driveway was empty and the lights were off. The place looked smaller than I remembered, almost ordinary. I did not stop the car. I did not need to. Whatever meaning that house once held no longer belonged to me. What surprised me most was the absence of anger. I had expected rage to show up at some point, loud and demanding. Instead, there was relief. Not because anyone had suffered, but because I was no longer responsible for managing everyone else's comfort at my own expense. A month later, I signed a lease on a small apartment across town. 1 bedroom, large windows, quiet building. Nothing impressive, nothing symbolic, just space that was mine. The leasing agent slid the papers across the desk and smiled. "Congratulations," she said. "New beginnings are always exciting." I smiled back, even though excitement was not the word I would have used. This felt steadier than excitement. It felt honest. The first weekend after I moved in, I changed my phone number. I closed the post office box I had maintained for years, the one tied to forwarded mail and half-truths. Standing at the counter, filling out the paperwork, I felt lighter with each form I handed back. These were small acts, almost invisible to anyone else, but to me, they felt like reclaiming pieces of myself I had misplaced. I unpacked slowly. I did not rush to make the apartment look finished. I wanted to live in it first. On the third evening, I hung a single framed photograph above my desk. It was a picture I had taken years ago while traveling for work, an empty road stretching toward a wide open sky. I had kept it because it reminded me that movement did not always mean escape. Sometimes it meant choice. The call came late one evening while I was making dinner. I recognized the number immediately. Daniel. I stood there, watching the phone vibrate on the counter, my reflection faintly visible in the darkened screen. For a moment, muscle memory urged me to answer, to smooth things over, to listen. I did not. The ringing stopped. A voicemail followed. He said he just wanted to talk, that things had been misunderstood, that none of this needed to happen. I deleted the message without replaying it. That was the moment I understood the difference between silence and peace. Silence had once felt like avoidance. Now it felt like clarity. Through mutual acquaintances, bits and pieces of the aftermath reached me. My parents rented a smaller place farther from the neighborhood they had grown attached to. Daniel stepped back from a few listings after his broker advised caution during the title dispute. Nothing dramatic, nothing cruel, just consequences unfolding without my involvement. I did not correct the story when it was told inaccurately. I did not defend myself. I had learned that not every version of the truth needed my participation. In the evenings, I sat on my couch and listened to the quiet. At first, it felt unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. I realized how much of my life had been shaped by anticipation, by preparing for the next request, the next adjustment, the next expectation. Without that noise, there was space to notice myself again. Helping people had always come naturally to me. Losing myself in the process had not been a requirement. I could see that now, clearly, without resentment. One afternoon, my friend Rachel came by with coffee. She looked around the apartment, taking in the simple furniture, the open space, the absence of clutter. "This feels like you," she said. I nodded. "It is." We sat together without filling the silence, and for the first time in a long while, I did not feel the need to justify any of my choices. What I learned through all of this was not complicated, but it was hard-earned. Support does not mean surrender. Love does not require erasure. Boundaries are not punishments. They are acts of self-respect. If you're listening to this and recognizing yourself somewhere in my story, I hope you hear this part clearly. You are allowed to protect what you build. You are allowed to choose proof over rage, calm over chaos. You do not have to destroy anyone to save yourself. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Some stories do not close with celebration or applause. Sometimes they end with something quieter and far more valuable. The ability to stand in your own space, breathe deeply, and finally feel whole.